Georgia conquered the Crimson Tide. This is interesting to see. Your daily sports podcast, news, narratives, takes, and gambling. Bryce Young looks like, well, he looks like Matt Corral and Kenneth Walker should have been Heisman finalists, is what he looks like. Georgia beats Alabama. They do it with defense. They win the rematch for the second time this year and the second time ever. Saban loses to a former assistant. Jimbo Fisher got him in College Station. And now Georgia wins their first national championship for the first time since Ronald Reagan was president, I think, sometime in the 80s. It's weird because Georgia feels like one of these blue blood programs, and they kind of are, but they were not good. And then they were good, but not great. And then they were bad, and then they were good, and then they were great, but not a champion. And now they are finally a champion. They did it, and they proved without a shadow of a doubt that the SEC is better than every other organization at this, A, and B, that if you want to win, you got to care about it. You got to care about it a lot, and you got to care about it more than anything else. Period. The gap between Alabama and Georgia and Cincinnati and Michigan it's enormous. It's enormous. I don't think there is any situation where Michigan or Cincinnati would ever have been competitive with those two teams with something on the line, ever. The gap was enormous. Shouts to Kirby Smart for finding a way to win with a team that was built to win in 2011. They really did a good job of making Bryce Young feel the pressure. He made some great throws that were dropped. They were dropped because the two best Alabama receivers had torn ACLs. One tore his ACL. John Mechie, I believe, tore his ACL in the SEC Championship or the Iron Bowl. And then Jamison Williams, his ACL looked like it just exploded. On a great play, it looked like he was trying to plant. He was trying to change directions midair, and that doesn't really work. His knee just it looked rough, and you feel bad for him. That sucks, and he's probably Jamison was probably, I don't know, wide receiver 1, 2, or 3 of this year's NFL draft, and that's going to be a weird opt-out thing that's going to start to happen. Maybe not. I don't know. Regardless, based on the ACL timeline, he won't have a good rookie season, and that's going to cost him, I don't know, millions. He'll probably go back to school, to be honest. Okay, so looking at other storylines from the national championship, Stetson Bennett III, the most Georgian name I've ever heard in my life, crying on the sideline after the pick six that you saw right there. We'll just keep replaying it. So Smart and Saban hugged in midfield after the game, and Nick Saban, this is similar to Gino Auriemma of UConn women's basketball, smiling. We'll bring it up here. There he is. Look at Saby Sabester just smiling. There's Stetson Bennett and Bryce Young. Saban smiling at his old assistant. I think he's closest with Kirby Smart of all his former assistants. Man. Smiling actually makes it worse. He's like, yeah, I'll get you next year, bud. Oh, man. Good for Georgia. That was a lot of fun. I thought that there's no way they could beat him, and it looked like it was another situation where Georgia had a lead, and then their throat was going to get ripped out of their body. And then Stetson Bennett III had a huge touchdown pass. Take the lead, or to tie the game, and then to take the lead. And then you got the pick six. Shouts to Georgia. All right, in the NFL, we're trying to make this episode quick. I've been talking a lot lately. So in the NFL, Black Monday happens. Matt Nagy fired, head coach of the Bears. Ryan Pace, GM of the Bears, fired. The head coach and the GM of the Vikings, that's Rick Spielman, Chris Spielman's older brother, and Mike Zimmer, fired. The big shocker of the day is head coach of the Miami Dolphins, Robert Flores, and the head coach of the New York Giants, Joe Judge. Those guys have not been fired. That's the biggest shock of the day. Flores is fired despite winning about 50% of his games at Miami. They did not make the playoffs. He did not love – did he love Tua? Maybe he didn't love Tua. They think that he was really abrasive and annoying. That's a rumor that's going around. He's also black. He's also a Belichick disciple, so those guys ruffle feathers. They were the first team in NFL history to have a losing streak of 7 games and a winning streak of 7 games in the same season. There was a really bizarre stat for the Miami Dolphins, which was that they were undefeated against teams with a quarterback that didn't have or that had an O in their last name. For example, like Burrow. Or wait, it was the other way around. I forget what the stat was, but there was something about quarterbacks with an O in their name where they would win or lose, and then the exact opposite were true against quarterbacks without O's in their name. So they were undefeated against quarterbacks with O's in their name because they beat Ian Book, and then they did not beat a team with a quarterback who didn't have an O in his last name. which is a really fun stat. Regardless, the Miami Dolphins looking for a head coach now. And they also, the other big bit of news from the Dolphins yesterday was that apparently they're not interested in Deshaun Watson now. They're off of him. Tua apparently has done enough for them. Also, he's so cheap. God, rookie quarterbacks, guys, they're so valuable. It's crazy how valuable they are. So yeah, Black Monday. The Bears had a press conference yesterday. So yesterday their press conferences with the Bears and Giants. We'll just do this because it's just so enjoyable every now and then to root for the world to burn down. And that's what happened yesterday with the Bears and the Giants. So the Giants announced that Dave Gettleman, their GM, was not fired. Excuse me, I digress. He retired. He retired from his job that he sucked at. And they announced that they're going to keep Joe Judge. And then someone in charge of the Giants, the owner or somebody, had a press conference and the media ate them alive, of course. This was all happening while the Bears were having their press conference, and they announced that they're going to tap Bill Polian, the old Colts GM who won a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning, and what a brilliant GM he was for finding Peyton Manning. Wow, what a great decision that was. They're going to hire Bill Polian to find their next guys, and so Bears Twitter and Giants Twitter just melted down. George McCaskey, who's Virginia McCaskey's son and the heir to the fortune, said that his mother was, quote, very, very disappointed. No one cares. That family doesn't care. The team is worth so much money. They're building a new stadium. They don't give a shit. They do not care. They do not care. And it is very clear. So they're also interviewing, everybody's getting interviewed, but they're interviewing Doug Peterson, who was the assistant with Andy Reid that was good, and they hired Matt Nagy, the assistant with Andy Reid, who was bad. But Doug Peterson had been hired by the Eagles 1 year prior. So they were like, well, we'll just copy the Eagles. The Eagles are Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz. We'll do Mitch Trubisky and Matt Nagy. Both of those were downgrades, which we don't actually know is true. Starting to suspect that Matt Nagy was such a bad coach that Mitch Trubisky might, maybe he's a little better than we thought. Who knows? Regardless, Joe Judge, of course, after taking quarterback sneak from a 5-yard line down 3-0 with an entire half of football left to play, back-to-back quarterback sneaks so that they could punt, is amazing. It is positively amazing. Reports out of Carolina on Black Monday are that Matt Rule is safe. However, he needs to hire a, quote, rock star offensive coordinator to keep his job, which is interesting because he had Joe Brady, who is a rock star offensive coordinator that he fired for no reason. Oh, pardon me, that's coffee. That they fired for no reason because they couldn't score points. So here is from the Matt Rule press conference, and I'll be honest with you, he looks fussy. And it's really strange because I think that the ownership is the problem in Carolina because they have a pretty good defense. They couldn't figure out the quarterback. They tried to get Sam Darnold, which was stupid. But if they had gotten Matt Stafford, I think they probably a borderline playoff team this year. They're pretty good. They just couldn't score. All right, let's listen to Matt Rule. Matt, what's up, bud? Yeah?
Bringing him here to be the starter, knowing that if he had
wait. I'll start this over because the question is why the team traded for Sam Darnold and then, bam, signed him for one more year right away. So, hey, Matt, Sam sucks really bad at quarterback. Why'd you do that?
Bringing him here to be the starter,
Yeah.
Knowing that if he had a great year, that he would be a high price guy, and
totally.
If he's a starter at that number, that's low end starter money. So that was a decision made.
Did you catch that? Wait, let's do it again.
That was a decision made.
That was a decision made. AKA, I didn't fucking do that. God, I love it. The teams being shitty is part of the fun of this. Like the Colts, I have this picture if you're watching on YouTube, and here's the video. We can play the video for a second. There was a plan in Jacksonville who fired Urban Meyer because he was a disaster, but then decided to keep Trent Baalke, who was the GM of the team, who was the guy that picked the cornerback last year, the cornerback, who got traded because it was off the field stuff. So that guy, the first round pick, top 10 pick last year, is not on the team anymore. They had Urban Meyer and all this stuff. So they're making fun of the owner, Shad Khan, who's the guy that owns Wembley and a Premier League team. There were like 5,000 people at the Jacksonville Stadium that were dressed up like clowns. And here's what looks like a mother and her son wearing Gardner Minshew stuff and Josh Allen stuff at the game.
Like clowns today.
Because we want the general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars out of here.
All Jags fans are kind of
look at the clowns.
We really want Trent Baalke to not be the GM.
Love this.
#fire Baalke.
Look at
trying to get rid of
makeup.
Baalke. It's a movement.
Oh,
we're
wow.
tired of the clown decisions, and we're rallying together as a team. We want to make a difference.
I'm here every week that they play, and it's just upsetting that I want to see something good, and I never do. But yet, I still come back.
That's incredible. Guys, they're clowns. I'm on the screen right now. Look at this guy. That Duval hat is sick, though. Oh, my God. That guy gets it. When they were doing that to protest their GM, they whipped the Colts' ass. That's the best part of this. Oh, my God. That's so funny. What else is there to say? When teams are a dumpster fire, it's enjoyable. I didn't enjoy the Lions dumpster fire as much because I am a Lions fan, but all of these dumpster fires are great. Speaking of dumpster fires, I want to go back to the Bears for a second and all of their mess. So George McCaskey, who was the majority owner, we said that he's Virginia McCaskey's son. They had a report that this guy named Olin Kreutz, who was one of the most respected players in Bears history, was on the 85 championship team, said that he was offered a job after his time with the Bears after he retired that would have paid him $15 an hour. This is a probably not quite a millionaire, maybe a millionaire player back in the 80s. And McCaskey, the owner of the team, and this is a guy that's like on like Ring of Honor, like all of I don't know if he's actually on the Ring of Honor. I may have misspoke there. But he was part of lore in Chicago. Quote, this is from ownership. I've learned over the years to take just about anything that Olin says with a grain of salt. That's the way it sometimes is with Olin. You don't get the whole story. Olin knows what the whole story is. So, like, hey, former player that we love, alumni, you're a liar. Gotta love the Bears. The Bears are trash. The Vikings are in a completely different situation. They had a very specific plan. They wanted to upgrade their cornerback from Case Keenum to Kirk Cousins because they almost won a Super Bowl with Case Keenum. They then spent way too much money on Kirk Cousins and just slid right into mediocrity. Zimmer is one of the greatest defensive coaches currently still coaching in the NFL. He will be the hottest name for defensive coordinator right up there with Vic Fangio, who was fired from the Broncos, which we talked about yesterday. But it's not the same thing with the Vikings. They were close, and it's just it was a time. Everybody's like not super upset about that, but the Vikings, they have to deal with Kirk Cousins, who is super annoying. Pardon my take. The sports podcast, of course, they had a great take on Kirk Cousins, which is like, you don't know why you hate him. He's Toby from The Office. Like, I don't know why I hate him, but I hate him. You just hate him. Don't trust him. You hate him. Which I believe most of us would agree with. No? I mean, I hate Kirk Cousins. Does anybody else hate Kirk Cousins? Speaking of hating Kirk Cousins, let's talk about Matthew Stafford, who's going to the playoffs. Third time in his career he lost a division championship on the line, final game of the season, and he said, quote, well, he was asked about the crowd noise at SoFi Stadium. If you're asking, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would there be crowd noise at SoFi Stadium? Well, it's because the Rams don't have a fan base. He said, quote, it did catch us off guard. This is McVay. Just because that's the way it's been all year. Wait. Where's the Stafford one? Jesus. Why are these people this way? Stafford was distracted by crowd noise at SoFi. That's the stadium. Or that's the story. At his own stadium, he was distracted by crowd noise on fourth down and third down and any time that they were on offense. The Niners took over SoFi Stadium, and everybody's done that this year. That's so embarrassing. That didn't happen in Detroit, buddy. That didn't happen in Detroit. Brace yourself for holdout or opt-out conversations this week with the injury of Jameson Williams. That's going to be an enormous topic of conversation, specifically because if you watched the national championship last night, it is very clear to you and everybody else that the best player in college football is number 31 for Alabama, Will Anderson. I don't know that I've ever seen a college football player like him. He is crazy. He is just crazy. And so we're going to enter into this weird world of should you opt out for an entire season? And I'll be honest, do it or don't. I mean, do we think that Will Anderson's priority is his communications degree or his math degree? I don't know what he's majoring in, but I know that he's majoring in football. So with NIL money, why not just get an agent? They'll probably spot you $100,000. You can go work out in California. That's going to be, and prepare yourself because that is going to be part of the conversation today. Now with Jameson Williams tearing his ACL in the final game of the season, and that's going to cost him millions of dollars, a couple million probably, because he won't be able to play his rookie year. So he's probably not going to be worth a first round pick. He might be, but it would have to be a team that's like, oh, we'll wait for like an entire year for you. which is going to be tough. All right, we'll get you out of here on this. Remember, we were talking about the tie off, and we were like, there's a big debate on Twitter if the timeout actually affected the Raiders' decision to try to pick up the first down. Oh, we've got breaking news. It's not breaking. Yep, it did. It was a conversation. This is Rich Bisaccia. We were talking about it. We ran the ball there, and they didn't call a timeout, so I think they were probably thinking the same thing. And then we had a big run. We were certainly talking about it on the sideline, where they were like, you know what, let's just go to the playoffs. And then the Chargers took the timeout and made it look like they were trying to win. And they lost. It's Classic Prisoner's Dilemma. Subscribe to the Game Theory Podcast, available wherever podcasts are found. I'll be back and better than ever tomorrow morning. Maybe we will get ourselves up to date with where we are in the NBA and the NHL and some big storylines that are going on there. It's time to start focusing on that. And, oh, yeah, by the way, there's a strike in baseball. Should we talk about that? I don't know. Have they earned it? Definitely not. Like, rate, review, subscribe, YouTube, all that jazz. I appreciate it.